This morning we are looking at what is probably a pretty familiar story from the 17th chapter of Luke's Gospel, the story of Jesus healing some lepers. There is a story of Jesus healing a single leper, which appears in all three of the synoptic Gospels, Matthew 8, Mark 1, and Luke 5. It's recorded as one of Jesus' first miracles. And that's not surprising because Matthew and Luke both followed Mark's gospel in the general outline. This healing of the 10 lepers, however, is recorded only in Luke's gospel. There's a general tradition that Luke was a physician, a doctor, and some people point to his interest in miracles that have to do with medical things, with healings especially. Matthew and Luke each had their own sources in addition to Mark's gospel. And Luke tells us at the very beginning of his gospel, he says, "Many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things which have been accomplished among us, just as they were delivered to us by those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word." In my opinion, that is really one of the most important verses in the New Testament because it reminds us that there was a lot of material, teachings and stories about Jesus that we no longer have. Sometimes people say, well, why does this gospel tell this and this gospel tell that? Why don't they all tell the same story? Well, they had a vast amount of material that they were looking at. And like any writer, they selected material. We don't know who Luke had talked to or what sources he had read, so we don't know where he got this story. This healing differs from the healing of the one leper in the earlier story. In that story, Jesus effected the healing by touching the leper. That was something no one in his right mind would have done in that day. Leprosy is actually a generic term for several ulcerous diseases, so when we see it in an ancient text, we're not sure exactly what is meant. But in that day, any skin disease was regarded as potentially infectious, although they didn't use that term, and it made the person who had it unclean. We marvel at some saintly persons over the years, such as Catherine of Siena in the 14th century, who cared for people with such diseases. And Catherine was known for even kissing the leprous sores. For the most part, though, people with any kind of skin affliction, which could be called leprosy, had to separate themselves, get out of the way of other people, and if anyone came near, they had to call out, "Unclean, unclean, stay away." This story also differs from the earlier one in that Jesus tells the lepers to go to the priest before they're actually healed. The healing occurs while they are en route. From what we can tell about the location of this story, they would have had a journey of several days from where they were when they encountered Jesus to get to Jerusalem. A priest would have had to examine them according to the instructions in Leviticus 13 and declare them free of the disease. I guess we should feel some sympathy for the other 9. One man comes back to thank Jesus, but he had to retrace his journey, and of course we have to assume that Jesus was still in the same place or he was able to find him somehow in order to render thanks. But it is a remarkable ending to the story. Let's read it now as it appears in your bulletin. Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go, show yourselves to the priest." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." This is the word of the Lord.